Mein Name ist Morinken Donatus. Ich mache nur die Anmoderation. Wir wollten schon vor 20 Minuten schon angefangen haben, aber das ist ein bisschen technisches Problem. Und wie das immer ist, sagen wir, man kann mich nicht verkennen. Ich komme aus Afrika und dort sagt man, oder wir sagen einfach mal, die Deutschen haben die Uhr erfunden, während die Afrikaner ihnen die Zeit. Aber beide macht auch Uhrzeit. Das heißt, ich bin dankbar, dass ihr ein bisschen geduldig seid. Ich möchte auch, ich kenne seinen Namen nicht so, aber ich glaube, sie sind ganz hinten. Sie haben, sollte parallel ein Workshop stattfinden zu Antirassismus. Und ich fand das hervorragend, dass Sie extra für diese Session ihre Aktivitäten verschoben haben. Das zeigt, dass dieses Thema sehr wichtig ist. Ich danke dafür. Heute sind wir hier, um zu diskutieren, die Zusammenhänge zwischen Ecocide, Klimakatastrophe und Zwangsmigration. Und das ist auf jeden Fall ganz wichtig, weil wir in den Klimabewegungen, wir haben systematisch dieses Thema verdrängt, einfach vergessen. Und das ist gut, dass wir über Artenschutz sprechen. Und zu den Arten gehört auch Menschen. Und die Menschen, die Opfer dieser ganzen Misere sind, die wollen wir im Fokus nehmen heute. Und deswegen mein Aufruf zu der Bewegung, diese bestimmte Problematik mit Frontex und angebliche Wirtschaftsflüchtlinge, diese Diskussion mit aufzunehmen in unsere Kämpfe, weil die sind Opfer unserer Machenschaften. Wir sind hier, weil ihr unsere Länder zerstört haben. Das ist mittlerweile ein alter Spruch, aber benutzen wir immer noch bis heute. Entstanden in den 90er Jahren, die wir benutzt haben für unsere Rechte als Geflüchtete in Deutschland zu kämpfen. Deswegen bin ich froh, dass Veteranen in diese Kämpfe heute anwesend sind. Ich möchte nicht so viel sprechen über das Thema, weil wir haben deswegen interessante Gäste eingeladen, mit euch darüber zu sprechen. Wir haben heute eingeladen Janki Rai. Und ich freue mich ganz besonders, dass sie bei uns ist und gesagt hat, ich mache mit. Deswegen möchte ich als Erste Janki Rai vorstellen und sie bitte auf die Bühne zu kommen. Danke. Und dann kommt noch ein zweiter Veteran aus unserer Kämpfe aus den 90er Jahren bis heute. Wir werden nicht müde, auch wenn wir älter geworden sind. Dr. Sonny Omweyeke, ich bitte dich auf die Bühne. Erlaub mir ganz kurz zu sagen, weil der hat eine ganz besondere Geschichte wie ich, wie alle, die in den 90er Jahren gekämpft haben. Wir durften noch nicht mal Deutsch lernen, wir durften noch nicht mal zur Schule gehen, wir müssten illegal studieren. Da muss man sich mal vorstellen. Wir haben illegal studiert. Zum Glück haben sie unsere Zeugnisse nicht illegalisiert. Deswegen bin ich sehr froh, dass du da bist, Bruder. So, wir haben von Suti gestern schon gehört. Einige kennen sie schon. Pronomen de, also sie. Insofern möchte ich auch wieder diese ganz starke Aktivisten auf der Bühne bitte Suti. Aus den Philippinen haben wir auch eine Schwester, Ina Gaspar. Und dann werden wir auch, okay, gut, alles gut, okay. Wir werden im Laufe des Abends auch nach Ägypten zuschalten. Ich hoffe, die Technik funktioniert. Ich bin sehr zuversichtlich. Da werden wir von Farida hören, die ist aus dem Sudan und sie wird auch über die ökozidale Aktivitäten in Sudan in Bezug auf Goldabbau und die Folge für Migration auch berichten, direkt aus Afrika. Und ich bin sehr froh, ich hoffe, dass es klappt, aber ich bin optimistisch. Last but not the least, möchte ich ganz besonders danken, dass Asib zugesagt hat, diese Session zu moderieren, weil sie so eine unheimlich starke Frau, die sich seit geraumer Zeit dafür einsetzt, diese Verbrechen in Libyen bekannt zu machen unter dem Motto Evacuate Refugees in Libyen. Asib, danke, dass du das moderierst.
Vielen Dank auch an dich, Peter, dass du das hier initiiert hast. Unser Global South Tent. Entschuldigung, ich muss erstmal meine ganzen Sachen hier ablegen. Schön, dass ihr so zahlreich erschienen seid. Ich werde auf Englisch switchen, weil wir haben 3 Personen im Panel, die Englisch sprechen. Aber wer eine Übersetzung braucht, kann sich ja hinten so ein Headset holen. Okay, so welcome. To this panel. The title of the panel is Bad and Good Refugees, the Hidden and Forgotten Causes of Flight. So I will introduce the panelists who were just called by name, but I will do a bit of a more thorough introduction of each of the panelists. And after each introduction, I would ask the panelists also to give us a short input about their work, from what they're currently working on, and also what they think about the title. Like, what comes to mind when you think of the title of the panel, Bad and Good Refugees, the Hidden and Forgotten Causes of Flight. So let's start with you, Jankirai. So Jankirai Painemal, is this correct, how I pronounce it? Painemal is, okay, so this introduction is actually in German. So I will read it in German, switch to German again. Jankirai Painemal ist Mapuche und eine Migrantin. Seit ihrer Jugend ist sie in der Mapuche-Bewegung für die Verteidigung ihrer Territorien und gegen Wasserkraft- und Forstwirtschaftsprojekte aktiv. In Berlin ist sie auch seit 1998 mit Respect Berlin in der Geflüchtetenbewegung aktiv und hat da auch die Kampagne Legalisierung jetzt, von der einige von euch vielleicht gehört haben, die leider viel zu wenig Unterstützung bisher bekommen hat, aber dazu kommen wir später, sehr wichtige Kampagne, ins Leben gerufen, die sich für die Rechte von MigrantInnen ohne Papiere einsetzt und ist auch Teil des Kollektivs Magun, das dem Kampf der Mapuche für die Verteidigung ihrer Territorien und gegen den Extraktivismus Sichtbarkeit verleiht. Autonomie und Selbstorganisation sowie die Interaktion mit Gemeinschaften im Widerstand im globalen Süden sind die Grundpfeiler ihrer politischen Arbeit. Sie glaubt an eine Welt, in der alle Welten möglich sind, wie die autonomen zapatistischen Gemeinschaften sagen, und setzt sich für Allianzen zur Rettung von Mutter Erde, unserem gemeinsamen Haus, ein. Vielen Dank, dass du hier bist, Jankirai. Vielen Dank für deine Arbeit. Und ja, wir freuen uns, wenn du uns eine kurze Übersicht über deine Arbeit oder vor allem halt auch in Bezug auf dieses Thema von heute, Bad and Good Refugees, Hidden und Forgotten Causes, die versteckten und vergessenen Ursachen von Flucht und Migration oder Forced Migration, dazu was sagen kannst.
Soll ich mit dem Mikrofon? Ja, wo soll ich anfangen? Vielleicht soll ich anfangen, bisschen kurz zu sagen, ich bin 97 hierher gekommen das war immer diese, es ist interessant, dass hier oft gefragt wird, warum man nicht hier ist. Ich werde oft gefragt, ja, warum bist du nach Deutschland gekommen? Und das ist eine Frage, die sehr heikel ist. Die Leute meinen gut, aber dahinter steht auch eine Frage, ja, du sollst nicht hier sein. So ein bisschen, so fühlt sich das an. Und ich kann sagen, für mich hat hat zu tun mit einem System, ein wirtschaftliches System, die kolonialistisch, patriarchal ist. Und das müssen wir oft vielleicht benennen, dass dieses System, das ist ein Wirtschaftssystem, ich spreche als indigene Frau, das ist auch wichtig zu sagen, das ist ein System, die in dem Fall meiner Biografie unsere Territorien weggenommen hat oder noch weiter versucht wegzunehmen, weil da bestimmte Ressourcen sind. Und diese Ressourcen bleiben nicht bei den Menschen, die kommen zu uns zu sagen, okay, wir wollen Entwicklung für euch, dass ihr zum Beispiel wie sagt man, Elektrizität hat. So hat meine Organisierung da in Mapuche-Territorium angefangen, dass da kamen die Staudämme und die haben gesagt, okay, wir wollen Staudämme bauen, damit ihr Elektrizität habt, weil ihr habt keine Elektrizität. Aber die sagen nicht, dass diese Elektrizität ist nicht hauptsächlich für die Menschen, sondern ist eigentlich für die Minen, wie sagt man, Bau. Genau, das ist im Norden von Chile, gibt es jede Menge, das heißt, und dann haben die indigenen Menschen bis heutzutage, die werden oft die Familie als Menschen, die gegen die Entwicklung sind, die gegen solche Projekte, die eigentlich Entwicklung für das ganze Land bringen. Und so wird ein Narrativ erzeugt, die uns als Menschen, die gegen Entwicklung sind und so. Und in diesen Gemeinde bin ich ich bin groß geworden, in ein Ort, in ein Territorium, die seitdem ich denken kann, mit solchen Themen zu tun hat, mit Staudämme, mit Monokultiven, mit diesen ganzen Pestiziden. Zum Beispiel, ich war letztes Jahr da und ich habe gesehen, dass die ganzen Flüsse verseucht sind. Und wenn man guckt, wie hier auch in Deutschland lebt und hier in Europa und man hat einen Lebensstandard und man fragt sich, warum ist möglich, diese Lebensstandard hier zu haben. Und da muss man ein bisschen gucken, wo kommen die Ressourcen her und wer profitiert davon. Und alle wollen wir gut leben. Das heißt nicht, dass ich hier schlechter leben soll, aber auf welche Kosten. Und da müssen wir die Ursachen gucken. Wo kommen die Ressourcen her? Was haben die Menschen davon? Und zum Beispiel in meiner Kommunität, wenn ich jedes Mal dahin gehe, die sehe, das wird immer schlimmer. Die Wasser wird weniger, die Wasser ist verseucht, die Flüsse sind verseucht. Und die Leute, ja, wenn sie irgendwo keine andere Wahl mehr gibt, die werden weggehen. Zurzeit gehen die Leute nicht weg, weil sie kämpfen, die werden kriminalisiert, die sind im Knast, die werden ermordet sogar. Und ja, das ist die, woran wir oder oder wir als Gruppe, weil ich bin heute als Vertreterin ein bisschen von Maun und auch von der Gruppe die Migranten, wo ich da tätig bin. Das sind die Ursachen. Und es ist für mich, heute habe ich gedacht, okay, ich gestern war in einem Podium, heute bin ich auch wieder. Warum? Und ich habe gesagt, weil eigentlich ich bin nicht aktiv nur in einem Thema, weil du kannst nicht nur aktiv in einem Thema sein, weil alles hat miteinander zu tun. Und das, glaube ich, wir müssen nicht vergessen. Und das haben wir zu tun zurzeit mit einem kapitalistischen System. In Chile, wir hatten das erste neoliberale System, wo alles privatisiert wurde, wo das Land privatisiert, wo das Land von uns, von den Mapuche, gab ein Gesetz in der Zeit der Diktatur, die haben gesagt, das Land muss privatisiert werden, damit sie verkauft wird. Weil unser Land war nicht, wir konnten nicht Eigentümerinnen sein von Land. Das war das Land für alle, für die Gemeinschaft. Und seit 1978 ist es privatisiert worden, gab viel Widerstand, am Ende wurde privatisiert, die größten Teil. Und warum? Weil dieses Land wollen die in den Markt, damit sie diese Monokultiven, damit die großen Konzerne Gewinne machen und diese ganze Papier und diese ganze Sache, das sehen wir hier. Ne? Ich manchmal denke so, warum gibt es hier so viele Papier? Wo kommen diese Papier her? Wo werden die Plantagen gemacht? Und da hat es sehr mit diesem System zu tun und ich glaube, wir müssen diese Sachen allgemein sehen. Und wenn ich mit Selbstorganisation, ganz kurz mache ich jetzt, weil ich glaube, das ist ein großes Thema, aber ich kann diesen Kämpfen nicht trennen. Da muss man zusammengedacht werden, weil das gibt eine Aymara-Frau, eine indigene Frau, hat einmal gesagt, hat in einer anderen Veranstaltung gesagt, und ich bewundere diese Frau, weil sie hat gesagt, die Mutter Erde stirbt, alle Ressourcen, die nehmen von der Mutter Erde, die machen kaputt, dieses System macht kaputt unsere Lebensgrundlage. Und ein System, die auf ökonomische, das ist nicht für die Menschen da. Für den Markt. Genau, das ist für den Markt, das ist aber nicht für die Menschen weniger Menschen haben etwas davon. Und die müssen sich nicht wundern, dass die Menschen irgendwann migrieren müssen oder flüchten müssen. Und und dann, wenn sie da sind, wenn sie hier sind, die werden auch ausgegrenzt. Und deswegen können wir nicht wir müssen auch dagegen kämpfen. Warum diese Menschen hier keine Bürgerrechte haben, keinen Zugang zu Gesundheit, zu nichts. Und mit diesen Menschen beschäftige ich mich selber, weil als ich hier gekommen bin, das war auch in solchen Situationen. Ich hatte auch erlebt, was heißt das, ohne Rechte zu leben. Und dann habe ich mich organisiert und ich habe immer gesucht, auch diese Verknüpfung mit der Geflüchtetenbewegung, weil ich habe gemerkt, das System teilt uns Migranten in verschiedene Kategorien. Es gibt die Migranten, die eine 3-jährige Aufenthalt, es gibt manche, die nur 1 Jahr, es gibt manche, die Duldung haben, es gibt Menschen, die jahrelang nur mit Duldung gelebt haben, es gibt Leute, die überhaupt keinen Zugang zu nichts, keine illegalisiert sind. Und dann habe ich gedacht, okay, wir müssen gemeinsam dagegen kämpfen und nicht uns aufteilen lassen. Und das ist auch, ich habe viel gelernt von den geflüchtete Bewegung. Ich war mehr in der Bewegung von illegalisierten Menschen, die Menschen, die überhaupt kein Recht haben, bis heutzutage. Es gibt viele Menschen, mit denen ich zu tun habe. Und deswegen haben wir in der Zeit der Pandemie diese Kampagne, Legalisierung Yes-Kampagne. Diese Kampagne ist nicht, ist auch eine Notwendigkeit. Und ich glaube, das gibt einen Unterschied. Es gibt Menschen, die in diesem Moment, wo die Covid war, da gab es die Parole, wir lassen niemanden allein, aber diese Menschen sind ganz allein geblieben. Die hatten keinen Zugang zu nichts, keinen Zugang zu staatlicher Unterstützung, nichts. Und dann auf diese Notwendigkeit heraus, wir haben gedacht, okay, wir müssen etwas machen, weil wir können die Menschen nicht in die Situation lassen. Und ja, und so ist die Kampagne entstanden und das, ja, zum Ende, so bringe ich vielleicht ist ein bisschen durcheinander, aber für mich kann man das nicht trennen. Da muss man immer in den gesamten Blick haben oder so analysieren. Und deswegen, ich glaube, wir müssen mehr diese gemeinsame Punkt suchen, wo können wir gemeinsame gegen dieses kolonialistische und patriarchale System auch gemeinsam kämpfen. Natürlich hat jeder von uns bestimmte Prioritäten, weil ich beschäftige mich viel mit illegalisierten Menschen, ich beschäftige mich mit Geflüchteten, mit anderen Themen, aber wie können wir zusammen, und ich glaube, das ist Herausforderung, ich habe keine Antwort, ich habe keine Lösung, aber ich glaube, wir müssen gemeinsam in diesen Prozess, wo wir anfangen zusammenkommen, und gemeinsam irgendwo der Druck aufbauen, wo genau das System irgendwo wehtut, weil bis jetzt, wenn jede Einzelne irgendwo manchmal fühle ich mich hier in Deutschland wie ein Hamster, immer in der gleichen Rad und immer die gleichen Themen. Irgendwo hat sich nicht bewegt und ich glaube, da liegt vielleicht, den Blick, was können wir gemeinsam und nicht getrennt in dieser Bewegung. Genau.
Thank you so much, Jankirai. So all of your activism, starting in your home country, in Chile, and then also here that you continued in Germany, came from being affected, right? And now you are saying it's also very important that the different groups that are affected differently by different systems of oppression have to come together. And I think I spoke also with a few people about this, how is it that we are not so connected, we are fighting on different fronts and everyone is in their own battle. How can we come together? And I think this is also a place where more privileged people, like people that are not affected by any oppressive systems, white people, can come in and also help these self-organized refugee or undocumented persons struggles by helping to make these connections, help with networking, with documenting and bringing together with other organizations. And always also whenever you organize something, like now also here with Extinction Rebellion, we are talking here about climate justice, right? But climate justice is a part of environmental justice, and then environmental justice is also a part of social justice, racial justice. So you always have to try to include this and mitdenken. Migration, Menschen, die von Migration betroffen sind, mitdenken. Okay, so I'm switching again. So thank you very much. And the next person that I'm going to introduce is Dr. Sunny Omwenyeke from Bremen. Thank you very much to come all the way. Dr. Sunny Omwenyeke is a human rights activist and a veteran of the refugee movement in Germany. As a founder of The Voice Refugee Forum, some of you might have heard about this refugee movement from the 90s, but still active. He co-initiated the anti-Residenzpflicht campaign in 2000. Wow, 23 years ago, with the introduction of civil disobedience, and litigated his Residenzpflicht case through the German judicial system up to the European Court of Human Rights in Strasbourg in 2004. For his fight against the Residenzpflicht, for the right to freedom of movement for refugees in Germany, he was imprisoned for 12 days in Bremen in 2004. He studied international relations and global governance in Bremen and completed his doctorate in the UK on transnational advocacy networks. formerly the coordinator of the Regional Asylum Activism West Midlands, UK. He founded in Bremen the Bremen Solidarity Center, e.V., registered association, and Together We Are Bremen, a self-organized refugee advocacy group. He works currently as empowerment trainer with various refugees and refugee groups and is a visiting lecturer at the universities of Bremen and Oldenburg. Yeah, this is a, a long introduction, but yeah, this is also due to the work that you have been doing. And yeah, maybe you can also share your thoughts when you think of the title of today's panel, Bad and Good Refugees, the Hidden and Forgotten Causes of the Flight. What does this mean to you?
Thank you very much for inviting me here, and thank you for organizing this camp. And thank you for your presence here, that you all managed to brave this weather, this beautiful weather, and you found yourself here. So, for some of us who come from other parts of the world, it's not a weather we enjoy so much, but it's the way it is. Maybe it's the climate, who knows? But all right. Where should I start? You know, I've got a little bit of a history on this whole issue. I came in from Nigeria. I come originally from Nigeria. I came into this country as a refugee. From Nigeria, a country that was just going through military dictatorship for over 30 years. And then I sought asylum here in Germany in '98. One correction, I was not one of the founders of The Voice. The Voice was founded in '94. I came in '98. So The Voice had already started before I came in. The Caravan was founded just after The Voice was founded, and I joined the Caravan in '98 when I came in here. And so, but I have been very much involved in the whole activities of The Voice and the Caravan until recently. And then, yeah, I left in between. I went to the UK. I did my doctorate there, and I came back. And I can tell you why I did that, because the very question, the very topic that you have the good and the bad refugees, and connected to the issue of migration, you know, there is only one way you can really understand this, right? There is only one way you can understand this. And the way to understand it is to see it from the perspective of the dominant power structure, white supremacist structure, nothing more. Everything is concentrated on this very particular ideology, and it is this ideology that is used to divide us, to say which one is good enough to be part of this dominant structure and which one is not good enough, right? That is the only way to understand it. Of course, different people can give different interpretation to this, but if you want to be critical of exactly why you even have to discuss this, you cannot run away from this idea of divide and rule, which stems directly from the power structure that is the white supremacy system that we live in. So if we understand that as the basis, then we can take the next steps to look at what is really underlying these different positions and structures that we find ourselves, right? So, on the issue of migration and climate, forced migration, so to speak, right? It's just so outrageous to me, in my own thoughts, to think of it that the Westerners, for whatever reason, do believe, really believe, majority of the white people in the West really believe that they are superior to other races. Even though I have a question about the term race, but I have no alternative to use right now, so I use it. I am very sure that if you carry out a questionnaire among white people in this country, in the whole of the West, whether or not they believe they are really superior to others, 99% guarantee, you can be sure of it. Many people will go with it that they are superior. I say this because, like you said, you read in my history, they have been doing a lot of stuff here on the struggle, on refugee struggle, and the struggle for equality. The struggle for equality, just to be treated equal as human beings. Nothing particularly special. We are not demanding a red carpet reception, just equal treatment, right? We don't even want to mention the police brutality and the violence. You know why the police is so popular an institution in Germany? Because it reflects the violence that the society wants to transport on us, wants to implement on us, which they do every single day. That is why the police is very important and popular among the German white people. In fairness, not only in Germany, in the whole Western world. That is why the police is very popular. We live in the same society, but black people, people of color, we are never treated as the white people by the police, who we all pay together. But they are meant to deal with us. They are meant to violate us by every single means possible. And our white friends and brothers and sisters, they think that, yes, they are doing a great job. Tell me, what does it show? It's reflecting what the populace wants. That's it. You want to know what is behind it? Think about the term white supremacy. There is no other way to understand it. That's where we are with the issue of refugees and who is good and who is not good. Many of our brothers and sisters, and they perish every single day in the Mediterranean. And you are living in the country, you are living in Germany, where if you pass a highway, you saw an accident happen, and you didn't stop to call for help for those involved in the accident. If you are controlled, you are fined for not helping them. And here you are in the country. Not only do they abandon their responsibility to save the lives of those in distress on the sea for a problem they actually caused by themselves, they prosecute and persecute those innocent people who try to rescue those people in distress on the high sea. You want to tell me if there are white people on the high sea in distress, this will be happening? There is no other way to understand it. This is white supremacy at its core. We can deny it, we can disagree with it. I would like to see the other argument, because there is none. You want to talk about the war in Ukraine? The African refugees who came from Ukraine? The bombs from Russia did not discriminate between blacks and whites in Ukraine. The white refugees were given everything you want a refugee to get in this very country. They were given transport to come from there to here. Think of it, my friends. I can stand here, I can sit down here and cry because of your racism. I can sit down here and cry. I don't cry for myself. I cry for you for not understanding what is happening to us. This is why in my work, I do not concentrate on white people, because 99.9% of white people will never get what we are saying, where we are coming from. I spend my energy, I spend my resources, I spend my time on trying to empower my fellow migrants, refugees, and others. Also black Germans, to be able to stand up and be strong to resist this oppression, to resist the racism that we face every day. For the white people, you can go to university, you can go to everything to study whatever and become a professor. At the end of the day, you ain't know nothing about what it means to live the kind of life that we live. Because you are brought up, you are socialized with this bloody white supremacy stuff, which you continue to teach others. And when you challenge these professors in the university, you become the worst enemy ever. I studied here. I studied here, not only here in Germany, also in the UK. When I was submitting my doctorate degree, my professors, they abandoned me 6 weeks before the deadline because they couldn't stand my criticism. If you fail it, your business. If you don't change what we tell you to do there, we ain't doing anything with you. I said, good luck. If that's the choice you gave me, I have no choice. I'm going ahead and doing what exactly I want to say, because it's my bloody name that's on my paper. I did it, thank God, whatever, I passed it. Right? I just want to say this. We are here talking about climate change and climate justice and all that. I happen to have studied a bit about social movements and advocacy and all that. It's not so long ago that we started to have Friday for Future. Look at this, what you have there, Kensarawiwa. Right? I just say this so that people realize it. The idea of dominance, the idea of having the microphone. The white people think the moment they start to say it, then the thing becomes important. It's crap. I can tell you 100% it's crap, because people have been dying from this for a very long time. You see it on the news, you see it everywhere. But who took it serious? Nobody. Who didn't do business with Nigeria when they assassinated these people? Nobody. Germany, UK, France, Italy, all of them. They continued to do business as normal with Nigeria, even when they were killing people, fighting, not just for themselves, but for the environment. And now, you have this girl from where? Sweden, or where is she from? All of a sudden, wow, we have to stop school because of crap. Real crap, I tell you, my friends. That is what white supremacy does to your brain. Because all of a sudden you feel you are so important, you know the stuff more and all that. What people have been doing and dying for years, there is no single recognition about it. And you want to tell me I should take you serious? It's very hard for me to take you serious, my friends. I only want to say one more thing before I stop and we can continue the discussion. If you want to know what we are talking about, we just had Corona. We just had Corona. For the very first time in the life of all you white people, for the very first time in your lives, and in generations, you were confronted with a situation where your white skin, your white privilege couldn't prevent you from getting infected or being threatened by Corona. What happened? Somebody want to say what happened? It set off a massive alarm in your heads. The whole country was crazy because Corona is coming. Corona is here. I was wondering, my goodness, I live in this country, my friend. I come from Nigeria that doesn't even have a proper health system like we have here in Germany. And yet, people could live comfortably, right? Corona was not second, third, fourth, or fifth problem. It was far behind. It was far behind. And here, you could just sneeze, you're feeling cold, you're getting sore throat, you rush to the hospital because there is a possibility there. And the guys there will have to go through all this stuff, drinking all sorts of local herbs, and they feel cool. And here we are. For the first time, the whole society was crazy about Corona. If you didn't vaccinate, my goodness, what an evil person you are. That's what we felt here. Simply because for the first time, some people were feeling that now we are being threatened. The idea of solidarity, the idea of sharing what other people feel, that we have always preached about, that we have always purported to be living for, the values, all of a sudden, it was dead. Refugees were in a camp, 700 people, where others were being fined for not having 1.50 meters from each other on the park, not even inside. And yet, this same society allowed it that refugees were packed together, 40 people in a hall like this to eat. They didn't even have a running tap to take water from the hall. In Bremen, where I lived, in Lindenstrasse, in the camp, they had to take water from the sink in the toilet. Where were the white people? Where were the white people to say, no, this cannot happen, we are equal human beings? Everybody was bloody, in panic, and running away from this stuff. I don't want to quarrel with you. I don't want to come here and chastise you. I just want to let you understand what we are saying and where we are coming from. Why it is very difficult for some of us to take you serious when you organize this kind of camps. Why it is very difficult for us to believe that you are serious about dealing with what the climate problem is. That is where we are. And the thing is this. Many of you still believe that you are doing this whole climate fight as help for the other people, for the poor countries. You ain't helping us, man. You ain't helping us at all, not one bit. We've been helping you from time immemorial. We've been helping you for ages. You owe us more than we can ever demand. Not until you understand that you are doing this, a bit for yourself and for the humanity that surrounds us, that is daily dying. We ain't got no business organizing camps like this. You know what is difficult to change? It is attitude. The attitude that brought us to this mess that we are now is what is difficult to change. And that is why many people, even among the most radical climate activists ever, they cannot go away from the way they were brought up, from the way they have been living, and take something else. You know why? Because they are enjoying the benefit of what they didn't work for, what they stole from other countries, and they think that if they manage to give some donation to others, then they are making up for it. It is rubbish, my friends. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the very clear words that you found. So now we already have identified a few things that that are responsible for this divide between bad and good refugees. Jankirai was mentioning patriarchy, colonialism, and clearly what you explained about white supremacy makes a lot of sense. We will continue later. I will continue with the introduction, and next up is Zulti. Back again, yesterday already in a panel. It's becoming like an everyday occupation. Zulti is a Kurdish non-binary activist, pronouns they, them, or their name. Zulti is part of Abolish Frontex, Lützi lebt, and a refugee movement in Germany. As a former refugee and survivor of both war and EU border politics, Zulti is an activist in the field of migration politics with the aim to raise awareness about racism, transphobia, border and police brutality towards BIPOC. Further, Zulti is a climate activist and has lived in the Hambacher forest and works on making BIPOC voices heard within the climate justice. Climate justice is always in quotes, justice movement in Germany. Thank you for being here again. And yeah, please let us know what comes to your mind when you hear this distinction or the title of today's panel, Bad and Good Refugees, the Hidden and Forgotten Causes of Flight.
Thank you so much, Azeb. Thank you so much for being here. I think this was not the plan to be 2 days on each other on a panel. And I think yesterday I already said a lot. And about good refugee and bad refugee, I think Yankirai and also Sunny already mentioned so much that I don't want to take this voice away from your brain. And in the end of the day, we seem to be like very angry, and yes, damn, we are angry and we are frustrated because this is not my second panel. We are talking about racism within the movement. It's not the first time we are here and talking about a good refugee and bad refugees. I saw already in the audience several people when the war in Ukraine broke out. We had to deal so much exactly with this term like bad refugee or good refugees, where we had to build a support structure for our siblings, for our community, as grassroots organization and groups. But again, this is maybe the only thing that I want to share. Not only white people were not there to support us, many of you became even a wall, a barrier for the works that we were doing, literally. And none of you ever raised your voice when they were kicking out Syrian refugees out of the camps to replace Ukrainian refugees. None of you were there when they were forcing black people and people of color out of the trains in Frankfurt Oder. None of you were there to support us. So definitely you were not there to support us, but you were there to become a barrier, a wall in front of us. And yeah, I don't know until when we have to talk about how unfair you are. I don't know until when we have to talk about how we are giving all this education for free. And as I was yesterday on a panel, I think today I would more listen and count all the education that the other panelists are giving. Yeah.
Thank you, Zulti. Then I will introduce the last panelist. Not the last. Yeah, that's true. We still have Farida joining us from Cairo. But let me continue with Ina Gaspar pronunciation? Okay. Ina is a Canadian Métis Filipina based in Berlin, where she's an organizer with ALPAS Filipinas, Philippines Migrant Political Collective. She works as the senior digital strategist for a project working on the intersection between climate, migration, and the border and surveillance industry under the European Climate Foundation. Previously, Ina has worked for human rights, humanitarian organizations like CARE International, Amnesty International, Mindanao, Peace Building Initiative, and Oxfam. Ina holds a master's in media, communication, and development from the London School of Economics. Welcome, Ina. And I would like also to hear your take on today's panel topic.
Thank you. And magandang hapon, everyone. Hello, my name is Ina Gaspar. I just want to acknowledge the panelists here, and I just want to sit at your feet and soak in what you say, and I feel revived by it. And thank you for that. I'm here not to represent myself, but to represent ALPAS Filipinas. As was said, we are a collective of political activists with Filipino migrant backgrounds and also allies organizing here in Berlin. ALPAS centers the broad anti-capitalist, anti-imperialist struggle in the Philippines as a rich resource here for us in Empire Europe, but is also deeply connected to the larger movement of international solidarity. And this is the core of our work and the message that I have here that echoes, again, what was said by the panelists. And the message is from climate activists in the Philippines. And it's that the fight for climate justice is interconnected with all struggles for land and for liberation, no matter north or south, no matter people on the move or people fighting to stay home. The Philippines is really important for our conversation today because it sits at the center of our discussion, because it is at the sharpest end of this crisis of capitalism, conquest, and climate change. The Philippines is one of the most climate vulnerable countries in the world. It has the highest number of extreme weather events globally in the past 20 years. 4 million Filipinos were displaced in 2020 alone. And that was mostly due to typhoons. More than 60% of Filipinos live on coastal regions and will be forced to move due to sea level rise brought about by global warming. But I ask this question to you today: what did the Filipinos do? What did the Filipino people do to cause this crisis? And the fact is nothing. Because the climate crisis, and again, is not just an environmental issue. It is about the historical and ongoing exploitation of our people and our land. It is about the imperialism of the US and other imperial centers like Germany and the EU, who have profited from exploitation of labor, the decimation of the environment, and the political violence in the Philippines. The high-emitting countries are the most affected. They are in debt to us. Yet they see the climate vulnerable countries like the Philippines as sacrificial zones, see our people as disposable for their consumption of fossil fuels. This is what we call ecocide. Mass displacement is just an outcome, as was said, from this crisis of conquest, capitalism, and climate change. And rather than climate action and finance needed for climate vulnerable countries like the Philippines to adapt, governments continue to respond with violence and border militarization to protect profit, not people. We see this here in Germany with the increasing budget and power of Frontex that enforces this racist border regime. And we see this in the Philippines, which is one of the most dangerous countries in the world for land and environmental activists. Indigenous people and farmers are leading the fight. They are leading the fight against extractive industries like mining and monocrop plantation farming. but are being targeted by the police, face violence, mass arrests, and even bombings in their communities, which often goes unseen in media, and especially international media. Just last year, environmental activist and teacher Chadwick Bao was red-tagged and murdered by the government, along with 4 others working in indigenous school. These were young people. So I'm still in awe of what words were said, and I want to sit with it. But I also want to again say that climate action, climate justice means system change. It means an end to imperialism that exploits our land and our people. It means climate reparations where the US and Germany pay the debt that is owed. It means the right to move, the right to stay, but also the right to thrive. We need to thrive. And until we have this interconnected movement, we keep coming back to this interconnected movement for climate, racial, migrant, and social justice, for land and for liberation, we don't stand a chance. Land is life, and we need to protect it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ina. Very emotional words. And yes, this is an emotional topic. We have to fight against these systems that were mentioned: white supremacy, capitalism, colonialism, imperialism, but also not forget that it's not only about systems, but about people, right? And some people that are also very strongly affected by all these systems are refugees in Libya. That are many of them, they are forced to leave their countries for different reasons. Some of them are fleeing from wars, from famine. But famine, where does famine mean? Does this not mean that there's drought, that there's climate change that these countries cannot even deal with, or kind of alleviate, or anything, that because the means are not there, so people are forced to flee. It means people are forced to flee the land if it is grabbed and then it's used for extraction of different kind of resources, as we heard now many times. And refugees in Libya. So we wanted to invite Hassan, not in person, but joining us online, but that didn't work, unfortunately. Like, the internet connection there is not very reliable. Also, the people there are, of course, under a lot of fear of repression, and so sometimes it's difficult to come out and in public spaces like this. But still, I will give you a little introduction of Hassan and the self-organized protest movement that they have founded. This was in October 2021. They founded this protest movement called Refugees in Libya. You can find and follow them on Twitter and Instagram. Why did they come together to protest? There were violent raids in a neighborhood called Gargaresh in Tripoli, where mainly migrants and refugees live. And they were violently detained. 5,000 women, children, men, 5,000 humans were just detained, and the accusation was that they were criminals, that they were prostitutes and things like that. And but of course, it's to do with the EU border regime that is trying to keep these people from accessing and reaching European shores. And so they ended up in detention. Then there was riots that broke out. And then there was a mass escape many of them managed to escape, and they gathered in front of the UNHCR headquarters there, and they protested for more than 100 days, for more than 3 months, until 2 days after UNHCR, the UN agency that is supposed to protect refugees, decided to close their office. 2 days later, the protest camp was stormed by security forces, violently dismantled. More than 600 refugees, migrants protesting there were detained again. Still, until today, 250 of them are suffering in Ain Zara. They are kept separate from other prisoners. These are the resistors. They don't want the spirit of resistance to reach the other people, I guess. They are suffering torture and exploitation, enslavement, especially now during Ramadan. Unfortunately, you would think maybe during Ramadan that they would, I don't know, they would treat them more kindly, I don't know. But unfortunately, during this time, they are being especially exploited for all kinds of construction works and things like that, because they themselves, the local communities, do not work much in Ramadan. So yeah, they are not only facing the EU border politics that are forcing them, that are keeping them stuck there in this cycle of violence. Also, they are facing Arab anti-blackness. So we have spoken of white supremacy, right, and racism. And there's this aspect of Arab anti-blackness that a lot of times people here in Europe are also very shocked when they see this anti-blackness in Tunisia that is happening right now and is reaching the news, and people are so surprised. Where does this come from? But actually there's a really long history of Arab anti-blackness starting many, many centuries ago. Either way, Hassan could not join us, but of course there are also many people. I spoke with Hassan about the topic of today's panel, and he told me that yes, of course, in Sudan, many people are forced also due to climate-related or extractivism-related causes, such as people from a mountainous area in Darfur where there are gold mines and the Janjaweed took the land. And they are extracting gold, and they are poisoning the soil with because they're using mercury and cyanide for the extraction. They are selling all of these resources which belong to the people. They are selling them to the United Arab Emirates, no, Saudi Arabia mainly. So we've been talking also a lot about that. This exploitation of the resources is done by the global north, like more like white countries or powers, but then there's also a lot of exploitation that comes from the east, from Saudi Arabia, especially in Africa and especially in Sudan. So since Hassan cannot join us, I cannot speak on behalf of refugees in Libya. I'm in a solidarity network that is called Solidarity with Refugees in Libya. Some of us are actually survivors of this Libyan detention camp. Some of us are people like me. I'm an Eritrean second-generation person who grew up here, very much affected by this because many of my people, Eritrean people, are suffering for many years in Libya. This is what brought me to this alliance and also to build this alliance. And yeah, but we are lucky to have Farida. Farida has been logged in for such a long time. Hi, Farida. And just listening. Can you see us? Yeah, cool. Thank you so much for joining on such short notice. I will introduce you to the people here quickly, and then you can tell us a little bit more about the impact of environmental impact of mining in Sudan, and also how it leads to forced migration, and also how, of course, it's always women that are mostly affected by this. So the introduction: Farida was born and raised in Sudan. She has a degree in zoology and environmental science from the University of Khartoum, I should say, and is interested in environmental management and climate change impacts on vulnerable communities and women. And you were telling me that 2 years ago you worked as a research assistant, but actually I don't want to read all of this, but I would like to give you the word so you can tell us a bit more about this.
Thank you, Azza. Thank you for having me. Hello, everyone in the panel. I enjoyed all the information you talking about. Now I can see clearly our struggle is one. We are faced by a lot of poor government and the shifting powers of in the world, actually. In the topic of the mining in Sudan, actually, mining in Sudan is nowadays, with the lack of governance and so on, a lot of the gold is being looted out of the country for what can I say? Respected countries like United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia, and they are helped by the Janjaweed in Sudan. And thanks to the EU, who they supported the Janjaweed and basically give them weapons and money so they can protect the borders. So no refugees can cross the borders, go to Libya and go to the Mediterranean seas and finally enter Europe, as Europe being as a self here as a dream for young youth and so on. So they seek for better life in Europe. But before that, they because of the economic situation in Sudan, and they somehow thought of gold mining as easy way to have money for their family and so on. So young generation went to mining in north of Sudan, also in the east and in the west. But the situation there is not well. What can I say?
Not well
No provision, lack of provision. There is no provision there from the government or from any environmental institute in the country. So one of the examples in West Sudan, in Darfur exactly, is a mountain called Jabal Amir Mountain. It is owned by the Janjaweed, and a company, a large company in Sudan is called Hajjar. They provide them with heavy machine, and start excavation and mining and gold exploitation. And they do not pay attention for the natural impact or the impact on the natural resources around the area. So the communities there suffered a lot from the water pollution, air pollution, and the rates of cancer and disformed children and miscarriages, and problem with immunity, a lot of diseases that comes from the explosion to cyanide and actual sodium cyanide and mercury. Although Sudan signed the agreement, Minamata agreement, on to prohibit the use of mercury, which entered into force in August 2017, and yet all the companies they use mercury and cyanide heavily. So a lot of international companies come to Sudan for the mining, for the gold mining, because it's cheap. They don't have to deal with the mining residue. They cannot process it the way it's supposed to be, where it doesn't leak into the groundwater or the freshwater source, or can pollute the air around the area. So they somehow collect all the residue, the gold residues, into heaps that can reach up to 100 meters in residential area. So they have no responsibility forced by the government or other or the state where they do their mining. So one of the biggest issues is the provision, the lack of provision, and the government is very biased to these companies. So they let them do whatever they want to do. The other side, the other factor is the civil exploitation for the gold. So the people in the communities, they start to the gold mining with a traditional. So they use their hands without mask or other safety. So they inhale all the gaseous materials, and they come in contact with mercury and cyanide. And most of the families have one or two people deceased because of their mining, but they had to do that because their farms or other jobs they were doing, it has been contaminated with or polluted by the mining residues from the companies, or the soil has been disrupted from the because they have to dig a lot of big holes, like it can be reached the depths of 17 meters, 20 meters wide. So it's a physical destruction for the soil. So they seek to do the mining in traditionally, and they get pollution and they get diseases. So one of the bad influence of or impacts of gold mining in Sudan, actually, it's one of the sads me a lot. I'm really sad about it. Is the archaeological sites. It dates back to BC. So due to the excavation work, they used giant machines. A lot of these sites were vanished, and they dig a lot of holes randomly without any supervision from the government or any other authority. Other than that, the serious environmental consequences and impacts that affect about 15% of the population of about 40 million that live there. So many cases of miscarriages, as I said, neurological diseases, respiratory system, and fatal poisoning cases were recorded. And they don't have the environmental impact assessment in most of these projects or sites. So actually the environment and human or living there or human lives come in the least priority list of the companies and the government, basically. So a lot of movement in Sudan or in Khartoum, basically, it started to collect data and to reach out to people living on this area, especially in the north of Khartoum, like 27 kilometers from Khartoum. There is the mining sites. So they recorded a lot of cases and have interviewed many workers in these mines. They all say the same. They fled Khartoum because they have no job or the economic wasn't good for them. So they fled to these mining areas in the hope to have money on to provide for their families and so on. But most of them, they reach the site and they cannot find gold. So they waste their money, they waste their lives. Most of them are dead or suffering from severe health conditions. So they sought, part of the people left the mining and became refuge in other countries, or maybe they are in the detention camps in Libya, or some of them dead in the Mediterranean. So it's a global issue today, and most of the countries with rich resources or natural resources, they're supposed to be rich and they're supposed to have what can I say? How can I put it? Good services for their communities and for the people living in it. But in the contrary, they are most of the poorest countries. Nigeria is not a different. Philippines, they are very rich in natural resources, but we don't have. We are not rich countries. The countries in the north, the upper north, they get the money, they get all the gold, they have a gold reserve. Sudan doesn't have a gold reserve, although it's coming the third in Africa in producing gold, like up to 100 ton annually. But they don't have gold reserve because most of the gold is being looted out of the country. So we have like around 350 international and national companies working in the mining, in the gold mining in Sudan. and we have like 81 sites, like civil exploration sites in 18 states. And last year alone, we had this torrential rains and floods that hit all of these states. And we were very worried that the mine residue, the gold mining residues, will pollute the fresh water and the soil because the floods took everything. So many people affected by this. It also affected the freshwater and the farms, and people rely on farming and fishing for their to provide for their families. It's very tragic. I can say it's a tragic situation in Sudan because this is like the hype of gold mining now. It's the best thing for young or adult people they're doing now. They left everything, working, studying, and so on, because it's easy money. They went to gold mining sites and so on. And I don't know, maybe I missed something, but that can sum most of the impacts. There is a lot of them, of course, but this is what I can say now. For my experience 2 years back, I went to this refugee camp in the White Nile state. It's in the south from Sudan, near the border from South Sudan and Sudan. People from South Sudan fled their country due to the war and the flooding, that they couldn't live anymore there. So they seek refuge in Sudan. And in this camp, it was like 338,000 refuge in one camp. They live in inhumane situation, especially the women. Like they are 55% of them are women and children, and they lack all the services that you can have. No electricity. The food portions do not are very short for them, and they cannot work like with the host community. They share two markets with them, but it's very difficult for them to work with the host community. Especially they sometimes there is incidents of rape and violence between them, and they do not accept them usually. Like when you say there's a white supremacy, and like no, we in Sudan we are more. The violence comes from other Sudanese also. So women there suffer a lot. I can leave it back here and see if you have any other questions about it.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Yeah, this reminds me that, so Farida, you just mentioned there is actually a law in Sudan in place that prevents this kind of using these kind of harmful substances for the extraction of gold, but then still they keep doing it. All these different companies that you mentioned, they keep doing this because there is no system in place to enforce this kind of law, I guess, right? So that makes me think of the ecocide law that we have been talking about with Peter and also with Dr. Sunny, also in relation to the idea of what does right to stay mean to you?
Yeah, thank you, Farida, for the insight you gave us about the situation there. When you mention the phrase "the right to stay," different people can read different meanings to this. If you're in Germany, for example, right, the first instinct is to think of it in terms of refugees who are here and struggling for the right to have their permanent residence here so that they can live in this country, right? But for some of us who have been struggling against this oppressive system from the very beginning, so to speak, we are fighting for the right to stay in our home countries. Right? Europe or the Western countries are not particularly attractive for us. Right? They are not. People don't believe it, but they are not. You know? And the reason is this. Our situations are more suited to our own climate, our own communal relationship that we have in our countries than this isolationism that we have here, this individualism that we have here, and this total lack of care for one another that you see here. So we are not really struggling to say we want to come here and live here. Far from it. Far from it. People have to understand that majority of the reasons why we come here is survival. For very many Europeans, for very many in the West, if you listen to these idiots called Trump, for example, he wants to build the wall and do all this kind of crap to keep people away. We don't need your wall to keep us away. We need you to get out of our space. Right? We need you to get out of our space so that we can live in our natural habitat. You come in, like she just described, you come in and destroy and pollute our environment, destroy our livelihood, and then you expect us to carry the Bible and the Quran and pray to God for God to feed us to survive. It ain't happening. Because it doesn't matter where it is. If the food is in the White House, if the food is in the chancellery in Berlin, we are coming to get it.
Yes, sir. Yes, we will.
We are coming to get it because we have to survive, and we will survive. And think of it. If we survived your violence from the period of colonialism and the slave trade till now, what makes you think we will not survive the next ones? Think of it. You can be sure. If you have a pension, you can bet it on it. We will survive. Because if the food is here, if the air is here, if the water is here, it doesn't matter your borders. We are crossing it, we are crushing it. And we're coming. So, in terms of the right to stay, the priority for us is the right to stay and enjoy our lives back home. If we cannot get that, we come here on a temporary basis or whatever, or the permanent basis, the right to decide whether it's temporary or permanent, we reserve it. And we decide it. And we don't beg for it. We demand it as a matter of right. If we are tired of it, we go. But you don't want to force us out. We ain't going. We are here. We are here. So if we are here, we talk about the right to stay. If you like, you bring in the police. If you like, you bring in forced vaccination or whatever it is. We take it if we want to take it. If we are fed up of it, we decide to go somewhere else. I was in this country. I came in here and I was illegal, so to speak, because they didn't accept my refugee claim at the beginning, although they were forced to do this later. And I was in this country for a whole lot of time, doing all this refugee struggle and the rights to dignity. And I was so pissed off with the racism that I faced in this country, I thought, okay, I'm done with it. I packed my bag and now I go away. That's why I just packed my bag. I got the chance and went to the UK to do my doctorate in the UK. I didn't think I was coming here anymore. I was done with this country because everywhere I went, the police was following me, controlling me, and all that. Among many white supporters that you feel are friends, I continue to feel racism and live racism even with them. So I was pissed off. I said I was done with it. I am going out of this country. This is why I left to the UK. You see, the right to stay here or to go away from here, I took it. Nobody had to tell me. Nobody had to grant it for me. I took it. I left when I felt I didn't want to take this shit here anymore. And then I came back here when I felt, now I'm coming back to this country. I'm going to teach you what I've learned over there. I came back. That is what it means for the right to stay.
Thank you. Take your right. Occupy your space. Take your right. Thank you. Thank you so much. Now I would like to, we have had many talks, and there's this observation that in the white climate activist movement, the focus is mainly on the systems. We also identified some systems that are causing accelerating climate change, and then therefore also the forced migration that comes with it. But there's not so much a focus on the people who are actually affected by these climate change, by these systems. And what do you think, why is that? Ina.
Oh, big question, big question. I mean, it always comes back to white supremacy, doesn't it? The climate movement in the global north has been seated in it, and it's narratives around migration that people are going to move because the world is warming is a convenient narrative to create urgency and energy, but also just feeds into the racist notions. And that is what the global north climate movement has been doing in order to get an emergency, to get climate action as an emergency. They've been utilizing migration as a way to scare. And what does that do? It doesn't make governments giving more into climate finance or adaptation. It equals weaponizing borders. It equals giving more money to Frontex, and governments know this. We see this in the United States with not just the wall, but third parties in Libya and Turkey in the EU context, and now in the US and with Mexico and further beyond. And so why is this because of convenience? It's convenient not to talk about racism. It's convenient not to address white supremacy. It's convenient to only talk about polar bears when people are dying right now because of climate change and have died because of climate change. And it's also convenient to be hopeless. It's also convenient to feel powerless because people are being resilient. They're finding resilient ways to deal with this. They're finding ways to grow and to learn. They're going back to their indigenous traditions in order to understand how they connect with the land. And this is people in the Philippines and beyond. And so this is what I'm saying, is that we're not willing to wrestle with that truth. We're not willing to wrestle with what does justice actually mean. And also that to sit at the feet of elders. And we talked about Fridays for Future and this kind of real moment of young people moving around, but how much of that was needed to just sit at the feet of elders and to listen? How much of that was to actually make space and make room for activists from the Global South? And we've heard this from Filipino activists who have said they had to fight for space in that movement. They had to fight to be known in that movement. And it's the same with Extinction Rebellion. And we have to acknowledge that in this space right now. Why are we in a Global South tent? Like, come on. So we need to wrestle with this truth, but it will liberate us. And the climate solutions that we will find will liberate us further. And that always comes back to sitting at the feet of elders, sitting at the feet of indigenous people who have been on the front line, sitting at the feet of our Global South leaders, and also acknowledging that. But I do also want to acknowledge that that double standard that we are dealing with in the Global South, that we are also dealing with governments that have been co-opted by the Global North in some ways due to that imperialism. And we see that in the Philippines with Marcos and this legacy. So again, I just want to kind of leave it there at we need to come face to face with the white supremacy and how it has been co-opted by the Global North climate movement, and what needs to be done and what needs to be laid down in order to actually have a truly interconnected rainbow movement that we need.
Thank you, Ina. So this, thank you so much. It brings me to so we heard a lot of criticism of our fellow white activists, but in the end we still have to work together, right? We have to find ways to work together. And I found this very interesting quote. So when it comes to white supporters in different movements, also refugee movement, for instance, here in Germany, and the experiences that you made, this is a quote from the website of The Voice. And it says, if you've come to help me, you're wasting your time. But if you've come because your liberation is bound up with mine, then let us work together. By Lila Watson, Aboriginal educator and activist from Australia. This quote reminded me of another one from an African-American woman and civil rights leader. Her name is Fannie Lou Hamer, and she said, "Nobody's free until everybody's free." Dr. Martin Luther King put it this way, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. So I would like to ask Jankirai about your experience of working with white supporters. And in this context, what does this quote mean to you? You're not looking for someone to help, but someone to truly understand the liberation. Their own liberation is also bound to your liberation. What do you think?
Ich weiß nicht, ob ich richtig verstanden. Kannst du mir die Fragen auf Deutsch? Ja.
Okay. Also auf Deutsch, ich übersetze es mal. Es ist ein Zitat, was ich... Genau. Die Frage an dich wäre, also ich denke halt so im Hinblick auf die Zusammenarbeit mit weißen Supportern, die eben nicht betroffen sind von diesen verschiedenen Unterdrückungsmechanismen, über die wir hier schon gesprochen haben, und deine Arbeit im Refugee-Movement vielleicht. Vielleicht gab es da auch Situationen, wo es immer wieder zu Schwierigkeiten kam oder so, dass man da nicht weiterkam. Und ja, so die Frage, das ist eigentlich keine richtig klare Frage, aber so, woran denkst du, wenn du das hörst? Das ist ja wie so eigentlich ein Demand, eine Forderung. Das ist von der Seite von The Voice. Also hier wird gefordert, ich möchte nicht, dass du mir hilfst, sondern dass du verstehst, dass deine Befreiung mit meiner Befreiung zusammenhängt. So. Und ja, was denkst du, ob wir vielleicht so etwas erreichen können, wie wir so etwas erreichen können? Ist das wichtig für dich überhaupt oder vielleicht auch nicht?
Doch, ist sehr wichtig. Wir haben ja keine andere Wahl. Wir müssen einfach zusammen, weil ich will zurück zu meiner Biografie. Ich versuche immer so auf praktischer Ebene und auch ein bisschen mit meiner Biografie ein bisschen im Verbund, so ein bisschen werde ich mit euch etwas teilen. Ich komme in ein Land, wo auch Chile ist eine koloniale Nation, die entstanden ist auf der Negation der Indigenen. Das heißt, wir haben nicht existiert für die chilenische Regierung und die chilenische Gesellschaft. Da gibt es auch eine weiße Gesellschaft. Weiß ist nicht nur Hautfarbe, sondern es ist auch eine Ideologie. Und in Chile war auch so. Und ich bin in einer Mapuche-Community aufgewachsen und uns wurde beigebracht in der Schule, in das System, die Bildungssystem hat uns immer gesagt, okay, die Indigenen existieren nicht, die sind nur in der Geschichte. Und so ist eine rassistische Gesellschaft entstanden. Und ich war in meiner Community und ich habe gedacht am Anfang, okay, wir müssen kämpfen für unsere Autonomie, wir müssen unsere Territorien verteidigen. So hat die indigene Bewegung, die Mapuche-Bewegung uns in der Organisation haben wir darüber gesprochen und haben auch die Leute waren aktiv. Und ich als junger Mensch habe gedacht, ja, ich will nur mit Mapuche zu tun haben. Ich will ein eigenes Land haben, ich will alle für... Und dann in diese ganze Bewegung habe ich danach gemerkt, ich kann nicht sein wie die Weißen. Ich kann nicht eine Grenze machen und sagen, okay, alle Chilenen weg, die Mapuche sollen unser Gebiet machen und die Chilenen abschieben, Grenze groß machen. Da habe ich danach Freundinnen gehabt, die auch sich damit auseinandergesetzt haben. Und dann war für mich ein Prozess. Ich habe gedacht, okay, das müssen wir gemeinsam eine andere Gesellschaft aufbauen. Das ist nicht so einfach. Das gibt, wie ich schon gestern gesagt habe, das gibt diese internalisierte Rassismus und Kolonialismus und die Leute sagen Sachen, die mir wehtut. Aber wie kommen wir weiter? Die Leute müssen sich damit auseinandersetzen und müssen einfach Verantwortung übernehmen für die Geschichte. Wir sind Menschen mit Geschichten. Jeder von uns hat eine Geschichte und wir sind keine geschichtslose Menschen. Deswegen müssen wir einfach, für mich war es so, okay, da müssen wir einen Weg suchen, wie können wir gemeinsam ein anderes Welt aufbauen, wo wir auch diese Autonomie, unser Territorium haben, trotzdem in einer Beziehung, so auf der praktischen Ebene, auf meine Biografie kann ich so erzählen. Und hier in Deutschland habe ich gemerkt, dass es sehr schwer, noch schwieriger war, weil diese Ideologie natürlich noch stärker habe ich gespürt. Und hier geht auch viel, wo ich da gemerkt habe, dass es in gemischte Gruppe war immer so, die wollen entscheiden, welche Themen reden wir und wie definieren wir. Ich erinnere mich, wir kennen uns mit Sani schon seit langer Zeit und das war viel Diskussion, wenn die geflüchtete Bewegung damals, die Voice hat gesagt, okay, das ist ein Apartheid-System, Residenzpflicht, da haben wir gesagt, wir können nicht keine Apartheid ist das dann. Diese Definition macht, das war immer ein Konflikt, aber ich glaube, wir müssen, oder meine Strategie damit umzugehen, ich kann leider, ich bin müde auch, ich will nicht so viel Energie daran investieren, sondern ich will mehr Energie investieren, so auf eine kleine Gruppe, auf lokale Ebene, weil ich habe auch nicht so viele Ressourcen, einfach irgendwo uns, ja, dieser Empowerment-Begriff ist auch so voll in, aber ich meine, wir müssen uns auch politisieren, wir müssen uns organisieren, wir müssen nicht allein sein. Und nur so, und unsere Gruppen, wir haben so angefangen, unsere Gruppe zu machen und haben wir gesagt, okay, wir wollen in dieser Gruppe wir entscheiden, weil das geht um uns, es geht um unser Leben. Und manche Leute haben das, manche Mitkämpferinnen haben das verstanden und die sind zusammen mit uns noch weiter. Aber manche sind weg. Aber ja, so ist das. Wir müssen einfach, wer sich richtig damit auseinandersetzen will, da muss man aushalten, da muss es diesen Konflikt und die bleiben. Und ich habe auch gute Erfahrung ich rede von einem Respekt, eine Gruppe, wo wir mit den illegalisierten Menschen versuchen, dass sie sich organisieren. Wir sind eine gemischte Gruppe. Wir sind Migranten und weiße Deutsche, wir sind eine Frauengruppe. Und da haben solche Diskussionen und es gibt manche, die das aushalten und die machen wir weiter. Aber es gibt manche, die weggegangen sind. Das kann ich, tut mir leid, selber, ich sage, ja, was soll ich machen? Ne? Ich glaube, das muss man für sich selber entscheiden, wie viel Energie will ich investieren. Aber ich glaube, ich bin schon älter, ich bin schon 55. Ich bin seit 97 hier, seit 98 schon politisch aktiv hier in Deutschland. Manchmal, ich denke, wir haben keine andere Wahl. Wir müssen einfach uns auseinandersetzen. Und dieses Zitat ist für mich super wichtig. Dieses Zitat, das ist, ich will nicht, dass die Leute mir helfen, ich will, dass die Leute mit mir zusammen kämpfen. Und wir müssen gemeinsam entscheiden, wo sollen wir gemeinsam, was ist wichtig für diese soziale Gerechtigkeit, das geht um Gerechtigkeit, das geht um das Thema, es gibt Menschen hier, die so am Rande der Gesellschaft sind. Und da fängt erstmal an, wenn ich überhaupt empathielos und mir ist egal, ich gucke nur auf mich, das kommen wir nicht weiter. Und ja, ich weiß nicht, was ich noch sagen soll. Ich glaube, dass ich plädiere, einfach dabei zu bleiben, Konflikt aushalten und wenn jemand sich wenn man sich richtig auseinandersetzt, das bleibt dabei und machen wir weiter. Aber ansonsten, weiß ich nicht, keine richtige Antwort. Aber ich bin nicht hier, um Antworten nur auch ein bisschen Erfahrung von meiner praktischen Erfahrung. Ich versuche immer auf praktische Ebene, weil theoretisch kann ich viel sagen, aber ich finde, auf der praktischen Ebene ist es immer kompliziert. Und für mich ist immer so, ich habe gestern darüber nachgedacht, ja, die Podiumdiskussionen sind wichtig, sind interessant, aber ich glaube, was hier in Deutschland so schwer ist so, danach werden wir uns vielleicht sehen und uns nicht mehr grüßen oder nicht mehr sehen vielleicht, bis nächstes Jahr, bis die nächste Extinction Rebellion Camp. Und dann finde ich so, warum können wir nicht in unsere unterschiedliche Kämpfe einfach uns kennenlernen? Wir machen auch als Gruppe Veranstaltungen, ihr kommt zu uns kommen, wir können uns kennenlernen, wir können diese ganzen Angst so ein bisschen abbauen, weil ich merke, gestern nach dem Podium bin ich raus und ich dachte, okay, die Weiße finden mich Weiße, die anderen sind mit anderen und ich habe so, okay, zum Glück habe ich eine Freundin dabei, wo ich mit denen reden kann. Und das, glaube ich, das macht hier schwer. Und was du gesagt hast, so, ich lebe hier in Deutschland und ich lebe meine Lebensstandard ist viel besser, als wo ich herkomme. Die Leute sagen, oh, toll, dass du da wohnst. Und ich sage, manchmal denke ich, will zurückkommen. Ich habe nicht die Voraussetzung, zurückzukommen, weil was ich hier, das ist Individualismus, dass man überhaupt nicht miteinander spricht, dass man sich überhaupt, wir rennen die ganze Zeit, der Kapitalismus hat uns so diszipliniert, dass wir ständig nur arbeiten, die Zeit, wir haben keine Zeit, wir müssen immer Kalender haben, um irgendwo ein Treffen zu machen. Und dann denke ich so, hat einen Sinn dieses Leben hier? Das ist auch kein Sinn. Ich würde gerne zurückgehen, aber ich habe nicht die Möglichkeit. Und das ist für mich nicht eine, wie du gesagt hast, ich habe so gedacht, ja klar, ich klage immer. Wenn ich zurückkomme, denke ich so, oh nein, schon wieder. Die Leute reden mit mir nicht, mein Nachbarn ruft mir nicht. Warum? Hat Angst vor mir, warum? Weil ich etwas anderes aussehe. Und ich glaube, diese Begegnungen, da muss man ernst nehmen. Wir müssen einfach uns kennenlernen, keine Angst. Und einfach, Jan Kirai, finde, ich lasse manchmal, dass die Leute Fehler machen. Wenn sie mir Sachen sagen, die finde ich, das sage in dem Moment, okay, das war nicht korrekt und so. Und wenn die Leute sich damit ich gebe die Chance, Fehler zu machen. Aber das ist meine Entscheidung. Es gibt Menschen, die können das nicht, weil das so schmerzhaft ist. Aber ich bin so in eine Gesellschaft aufgewachsen, wo von Anfang an Rassismus, und da habe ich mir gedacht, okay, ich versuche, dass die Leute dass es die Möglichkeit, dass sie sich ändern. Aber das ist meine Entscheidung. Ich respektiere auch die Leute, die sagen, ich habe keinen Bock mehr zu hören und ich habe keinen Bock mehr, wenn jemand so etwas sagt, das gehe ich weg und ich habe nicht mehr zu tun. Ich versuche, weil ich sehe, für mich die sabbatistische Bewegung ist ich habe so immer im Kopf, weil ich sage, ich will nicht sein, nicht so werden, ich will nicht so werden, was ich selber kritisiert. Und ich will nicht so Grenzen setzen, ich will nicht die Leute abschieben, ich will nicht meine eigene Welt nur bauen für mich, weil das wird nicht möglich sein. Und das heißt, deswegen orientiere ich mich sehr an der Sabbatistik, sagen, ich will eine Welt, wo alle Welten möglich sind. Aber bis dahin zu kommen, ich verliere noch nicht die Hoffnung. Ich habe einen Sohn und ich versuche es mit ihm, dass es auch viel mit ihm darüber zu sprechen. Aber ich glaube, ja, so ist das. Danke.
Vielen, vielen Dank, Jankirai. Alles, was du sagst, ist super wichtig für uns. Sorry? Yeah. Yeah. No, you can't. There will be a time where there are questions, and then you can ask it. Is that okay for you? No. No. But thank you still for your reminder. Thank you. Yeah, it's also important to watch the time because we're in Germany, and I mean we did start a bit later, but still, that was the African time that we started, and yeah. So I think. First of all, thank you for what you just said. It's really important because we do have to find ways to work together, but it cannot also always be on the marginalized people to find these ways and to try again and again to explain. And so there must be also an effort from the other side. And I also spoke with Sunny about these kind of like, he told me he was reflecting about this almost 30 years of political work here in Germany with different kind of activists, also with white supporters, and reflecting what did we learn from this. I think it's also important, I'm asking also out of self-interest because I'm an activist of, I don't know, 3 years or so. and I'm starting to encounter these issues and they sound very familiar, like, so not so much has happened. So I would like to, like, maybe as a closing, we can say, like, what are our demands? What are our demands? So I think that from what Jankirai just said, one demand is like, wie sagt man das? Demand, yeah? Ja, Forderung. Yeah. Yeah. I know that demand is Forderung. No, but one of the demands that Jankirai also just mentioned is that that people have to be ready to aushalten, yeah, to endure these difficult discussions about racism, for instance, right? To endure them and to stay there, to stick around, to look at yourself, to do the work so that we can work together, right? So this is one of the things you just said. Another thing also, to be more open with each other, to open the doors for each other, to join and to start talking to each other more. This is another demand. And now I would like to hear from Sunny, what are your demands?
Yeah. Demands, if I but seriously, if there is something I would demand, because I'm a black person, as you see, and there are people of color here, and there are white people here, I will have different demands for different people, right? My first demand would be for the white people, and I would tell all those who are activists in any form, whether in the form of justice, climate justice, anti-racism, anti-whatever it is, the starting point is decolonizing yourself. That for me is the starting point. Like she just said, I've been doing some reflection for about 2 years now on my long years of activism here in Germany and also in the UK. I have come to the conclusion, you cannot do anti-racist work, you cannot do climate justice work, activism, without decolonizing yourself. There is just no way around it. Because it is too central. It is too central to how we were brought up, to the nature of the institutions that guide our daily lives and upbringing. It is not possible. Therefore, anybody who is serious about fighting for equality, about showing solidarity, about fighting for climate justice, the first point for each and everyone is to go in and decolonize yourself. And I will make this demand to the blacks and the people of color. On the other hand, I belong to the same group, right? We have been educated based on this same colonial structure. I hold a doctorate degree today. If many people see me on the way, they address me as a doctor or whatever, everybody think I'm very wise. I am not wiser than any other person here sitting here. But we have been made to think that because we got this bloody certificate in our hand, we are so important. It's crap. And therefore, we who come from this other side, we have to re-educate ourselves. Our worth, our values, our history is not judged by the certificate you hold in your hands. We've got to get it at our system, totally, because it only leads to destruction. We are being made to believe that we are living in a meritocratic, in a system of meritocracy. You are in a high position because you merit it. The different handshakes that you had, that your parents had, that your generations had to bring you to that point, nobody reckons with it. And they want to look at you like you had a degree, you are very qualified, and therefore you are a better person. It's rubbish, my friends. And therefore, we have to change this in our own minds as well. That's where I will stop for now.
Thank you so much. Decolonize all minds. All minds. Thank you. I know, Zulti, you said that you'll just be listening today, but when it comes to demands, I'm sure you have something to say, or any other closing remarks, anything that you want to get off your chest.
Thank you so much. I actually don't know from where to start. Maybe first I will start with some wishes. I know it's not Christmas, but I still tell my wishes. First of all, I want to say that I said it yesterday too. Being an active person or being an activist for us is not a decision, it's not a choice. We are forced to be active and do activism because it's about our life, because it's about our community, because it's about our safety. So we are forced to do so. So for white people, I see it as a performance when they are protesting. Like, you are going on the street, do your performance, going home, nothing changed. Yesterday, Peter also mentioned our work always based and depend on our capacities and energies as grassroots organization and groups. And it's very, very hard for us to get so much money like you do. For example, on 3rd of March, you do a protest called Global Strike, I don't know why there was not, why global south were not the front block, and many other questions. But also, how come for a global strike while global south or the MAPA people are suffering because of hunger, and you are paying 150,000 euro for one day to strike in one city. Give us this money and we do it better. We can bring our people in safety. We didn't talk about abolish Frontex. Abolish Frontex. We didn't talk about Frontex. The first thing that I came to this country and have been told was, you are taking our taxes, but your taxes are going to Frontex, and Frontex killing us, drowning us, and let us alone on the borders to get frozen to death. This is where your money are going. Maybe you should start thinking of if you really pay tax, or if you collect all your tax and give it to us, for real. My demands is directly start with, yesterday I said it and today I say it again, all this climate movements, no justice, because there's no justice without us, without including us. My demand was and is and still, and I think it's demand from all of us as grassroots organization, that you big organization and groups with all this money give some percentage of this money to us. 20%, 25%, 50%, that's on you. Because you need to realize that we suffer and you profit from it. The world is on fire, but still the blonde and blue eyes are still sleeping. So you are very, very, very responsible to everything that happened to us. We are injecting dream to fall asleep, to see our liberation and freedom. But every time, again and again, we wake up from the sticks and guns of your state, not my state. From a state that you vote to them to be there, because we are not allowed to vote. And my next demand directly is that you people call communists, anarchists, whatever you call yourself, white people, give your vote to migrant people, because all the decisions that you make affecting us and killing us on the street and building police station in Koti to brutally violate our body, our existence. I just wrote something and I am ending this like that. White people, to the question about liberation, white people don't see that our liberation connected together until they or their comfort zone is in danger. Like how they complain in the night when we hear music or when we are too loud, but they are not living in our city that in the night we have to wake up and get disrupted by the bombs and bullets that you are raining on us. And last but not least is that you think about how you are positioning, or maybe positioning is a wrong word, but how you are doing your actions. Maybe you don't do your actions always in Mitte, but also come into our areas, so you can include us and give us the space to speak for our pain. You don't do all the time actions and protest here in front of this climate minister, whatever you call it, but also do it in front of Ausländerbehörde, in front of job center, because in all of these places the decision of deportation are made, and we expect you to be there in our actions, as Yankirai also mentioned before. For example, from 1st of June until 6th of June, we have the protest camp against one of the brutal, inhumane, and biggest deportation center in all Europe. And you are very welcome there to stop them, because we cannot stop them alone. And yeah, that's my demand. And reflect, and reflect, and reflect, because we are in pain, but a very, very, very painful pain. And you have to do something about it.
Thank you so much, Sulti. Yes, we are in pain. Yesterday we heard a voice from a white activist saying that I'm trying to feel your pain, but I'm thinking it's unlikely that you will ever feel the pain, but it's more relevant that you think about what is your part in this pain, what is the responsibility that you have in this pain, what is your complicity. That's what my demand would be, but we also want to hear Ina's demands really quick. Then we will come to an end. Should we do first a question? Yeah? Okay, so then we... The two questions, yeah. Just more questions. Yes, I will open to the questions from the audience after the demands from Ina, if you have any.
Oh. I think I will give my time to my sister who is in Sudan at the moment, but I do want to say one thing around what we heard from climate activists in the Philippines is that they don't expect people from the labor movement, from the human rights movement to go to them. They go to them. That's what we need to do. That's exactly what this call is don't expect people to come to the camp. You have to meet people where they're at. And that's really how we build that interconnected movement, in understanding that we need to be part, we need to go to where people are at rather than the other way around. And that's just an example of stepping away from that supremacy, the stepping away from that idea that we are better than others, or our issue is the most important. And then also to think about beyond mitigation and beyond admissions, because we're talking about people right now who are suffering from this climate crisis.
Thank you so much. Okay, so then about the questions, yeah.
So you can have that. Sorry, my question actually is about solutions. We'll let somebody out, I think.
I wrote. Hey, Farida. How are you? Are you in a hurry to leave us?
No, I'm enjoying the talk.
Yeah, that's what I thought, because we were also... okay, so there is a question for you from the audience.
Okay, my question is actually general, and I would want to know how we can mobilize the so-called climate justice movement in the global north to galvanize and come together and see how we could dismantle this Geneva Convention. Because this Geneva Convention is what they use to disqualify us, criminalize us, and tag us as economic refugees. And do we need this colonial structure? If not, what instrument should be in place to guarantee protection for victims of ecocide and victims of this climate catastrophe, which is going to be more? We've had in the last days a lot of submissions from PIMA. We had that almost about 3 billion people are under threat of genocide, and these people will have to find another place of abode. So how do we dismantle that colonial structure. That's number one. Then number two, how can we enforce a global climate passport, especially for Philippines and other Pacific countries whose land almost about 50% are gone now? Thank you.
To whom is your question directed?
Actually, it's general, but I would like Ina to tackle that first.
So there is a lot of hesitation in making climate refugees recognizable within international law. And that is because at some point we will all be climate refugees or we'll all be internally displaced. And at the moment, most migration from climate is happening internally rather than cross-border. But it also speaks to the limitations of the Geneva Convention and how the convention only covers a certain amount of status, a certain amount of options. And so conversations around people who are working on climate-linked migration, for example, are that in the international negotiations, migration should be included in adaptation practices, that people have moved from millennia. We have always moved. And so we need to include safe pathways rather than what we currently have now, which is a border regime that is continuing to be racist and also is now most likely going to rely on computers and AI and things like that, who will continue to systematize this. But on the other hand, there's also loss and damage. Loss and damage is becoming increasingly important, especially to Global South partners. This is what they are fighting for the right to remain, the right to be able to adapt and build their homes. This is also goes to climate debt. And so in terms of international recognition of climate refugees or what's going to happen, I mean, there's also conversations on how do you migrate a whole community in order to preserve their culture, their traditions, their livelihoods. They're doing this in the United States at the moment with First Nations people. They're thinking about this in island regions, in other places. But the problem is that so much of our culture is tied to the land. So much of what we do is tied to the land. And so that is where the right to stay is also so important. But loss and damage has to be important. Right now, loss and damage is often set at the sidelines in COP, in international spaces. But in the global north, what we also need to do is include, not just fight against fossil fuel companies, but include border and surveillance companies within our narratives, within our political analysis, because this is what's going to happen to all of us. And this is what's happening now. And at the moment, the migrant justice movement needs that kind of solidarity. They need that allyship. And that is what the climate movement has done well, is doing this corporate campaigning and being on the front lines before, laying yourself down before others. So I'm not saying that they've done that well, but that's what they need to do. Sorry, I'm just going to clarify that. But again, in terms of climate refugees, it's still very contentious. And again, it's because at one point we will all be on the move, and we have to recognize that.
Thank you so much, Ina. And yes, we will all be on the move one day. And some of us are already, of course. And so the Geneva Convention only includes, it only offers protection to people that have been forced to leave their country based on political persecution, or based on persecution based on race, ethnicity, religious belief, and so forth, or conflict, war, right? But all these climate refugees, as you just called them, are not included at all. And we already see that people that have taken this horrible journey from, let's say, Niger Delta, Nigeria, where they don't have any means of livelihood, they cannot live there, and then they cross the continent and they reach Libya and they experience torture, extortion, enslavement, and somehow they make it across the Mediterranean if they don't drown like hundreds and thousands of others. It's basically like a graveyard of mainly African or refugees. And then they get here, they seek asylum, and they don't get asylum because they are economic refugees or something. They label them economic refugees. They don't get access to protection, to any kind of rights. So this Geneva Convention is definitely totally overcome, and it's also, as Peter just mentioned, it's a colonial instrument that wasn't ever made for any other refugees than white refugees. But with this Geneva Convention that we currently have, we see that it works very well in the reception, for instance, of Ukrainian white refugees. There it works perfectly well. But all the other refugees we were speaking about, it's difficult. Okay, so thank you so much for all of your contributions. I want to open the floor for questions now, but we have only like maximum 10 minutes or so. So be quick. But there was already someone who had a question for Farida. So is this person still here? No, they had to go, right? So it was them who had to go, not Farida. Okay. So any other questions from the audience? Or are you exhausted after sitting here 2-3 hours?
So we spoke a lot of climate justice, and I try to hurry up with a small input, which I think it could be very important. Maya Gopal wrote in a book that there is a possibility that 10 billion people can live in equality on this earth and without leaving the main structures. This means there can be schools, there can be hospitals, there can be, for example, 15 square meters per person, 15 liters per person and day, 15 kilograms meat per year, 1 handy per person, and all of this stuff. And then there is a question to the white people to decolonize your lifestyle means to give all, to realize this, because there is no more right for us to use more. Using more is unsozial, is colonialism. And my dream of going further in our movement is building groups, is building villages, is building small eco-villages to realize this kind of lifestyle together. This is my dream, coming forward to decolonize myself and I hope also the movement.
Thank you so much. Decolonization of the mind, our minds, their minds, and also the lifestyle. Maybe Farida, we don't have a question for you anymore, but since you're joining us from Cairo, do you have any final remarks before we wrap it up today?
It's just a news came to me today that the Janjaweed, they seized the country in Khartoum and other cities, major cities, and they hit the airport, Khartoum airport. So all flights have been cancelled and no flying in from Sudan or outside the country. So I don't know what to say. So all of our dreams of stability or civilian government, I don't know what to say. It's vanished. Today, everything vanished. Just because 2 dictators from the military and the rabid force, like Janjaweed, are destroying the country right now. Right now. I don't know what when I think about climate justice, when I think about all the things that we want to do, we're hoping to do to the world, and you find this kind of militia and dictators are ruining everything. So it's hard to talk about climate justice in this kind of situations, I think. I don't know what to say, but I'm really glad to hear from all of you. We share a lot of atrocities and we share a lot of dreams for a better world. But I think it's a long way for us to achieve most of it. Thank you all for having me.
Thank you so much, Farida. Thank you. This is really horrible news about the Janjaweed taking over. Janjaweed, by the way, also have been heavily financed by Germany, especially, and the EU also in general, to further their this border externalization, fortifying borders, militarizing borders, giving money in the hands of militias. And what do? This. And what we didn't talk about today, because I don't know, it didn't come up, but Sudan also has a very strong movement, a protest movement that has been so strong, like protesting every day in the face of live bullets, losing their lives, and then still going on to protest against this military dictatorship, you can call it. They are demanding that there should be a civilian government. They've been doing this for years, and they are so courageous people. I don't know, so courageous and inspiring people. And this is really, really devastating news. And since we have been talking the whole night about how it's all tied together, I think this is also a time where you have to think, like, how can we now support the activists in Sudan who are so courageous, who are like an example to anyone of us here. This would be my last word. I don't have big closing remarks. We heard the various demands from our longtime activists like Sunny, Jankirai, our younger activists like Ina and Zulti. And I hope you can take this into your heart. Take this home with you, reflect, and decolonize your minds, your lifestyle. And don't forget to include us in future events. Join our events. And let's work together for a better future. Thank you.